Hello and a very warm welcome to Scale Up India, the Sonicon Spotlight brought to you in collaboration with PayU, one of India's leading payment solution providers. I'm Priya Sheth, and through this series, we aim to bring you first-hand growth insights from some of the finest minds from the fast-growing startups in the ecosystem. Today, we're here to talk about effective marketing strategies for building your startup brand. Now, when it comes to marketing, there's nothing better than a first-hand experience and perspective from a successful D2C brand owner for effective marketing strategies. Now, D2C brands operate in a complex and challenging marketing environment, and their insights will be invaluable to founders looking to grow and scale their brands. To discuss the nuances of building a brand in an extremely competitive market, we have with us none other than Malika Sadani, who is the founder and CEO at the Moms Company, India's leading company for toxin-free products catering to expectant and new mothers seeking natural, chemical-free products for their daily personal care regimen. Thanks for joining in, Malika. We're so happy to have you with us today. I want to begin by talking a little bit about how this whole competitive landscape is shaping up, because, as a startup, you got to compete with already established players in the ecosystem. So with constrained budgets like most startups have, how do you ensure that there is credibility, brand recognition? So what do you think is an effective marketing strategy to adopt in such a scenario?
Thank you, Priya. Thank you for having me. I think very rightly said, right? So I remember when we were starting off and people said that you're getting into an extremely competitive category that's led by people who've been around for so many years altogether, right? And that's where we started. And when we decided to take the plunge, I think the one thing that was there for us that we wanted to differentiate ourselves from anybody else was the fact that we definitely wanted to create a product that gives you a very differentiated experience than what anyone else would ever give you, right? And that was the premise on how we started, and what we thought was really our primary core differentiation from everyone out there, right? And which is where we kind of figured saying that if my product has to be different, what can be the comps around it, which can be completely different. And that's when we kind of came up with the whole concept of saying that we want to stand for something which is safer than anything else that's available. How do we translate safe into a language that the consumer understands, and then sort of encompass it all together to make a communication that lands well on the consumer. And I think the few things that happened very well for us, and that's what I'd like to share today, is the fact that D2C or a startup has the privilege of being extremely, extremely agile, right? You don't come with preconceived notions, you don't come with preconceived formats. So, you're building at the same time while you're also iterating whatever is going on out there, right? Which is where I think it's extremely important that you stay agile and you respond to your consumers' needs really, really quickly. I think the fact that we could at the Moms Co constantly keep listening to the mothers and the women out there and keep iterating and creating products that they were really looking out for was something that really helped us build trust in the whole category and the brand. And that, I think, is one of the main things that the founders and should really focus on when they're creating that. One, being the product extremely differentiated, and second, constantly listening to the consumer's needs to be able to sort of create what they really want, because that's at the core is what differentiates us from anyone else out there.
Malika, when you look at the whole social media landscape, you have so many channels of marketing out there in the digital world. But as a brand starting out with a limited budget, what should be the focus areas within the whole digital ecosystem for brand building? If you could tell us something that worked for you, and what is the kind of advice that you have for brands in space?
I think, the question is very relevant for us, and it also takes me down by the memory lane when we started, right? So when we started, obviously, as you start, the budgets are limited, right? There's only a limited spend that you can make, which is directly related to how much revenue you're making. And I think what we did at that point of time was first started off with our own social page, and that became the primary message of reaching out to newer set of audiences and consumers. What we very quickly then did was tried using different messages and tried to figure out which message hits home for the consumer. Used smaller forums, like tried influencer marketing. We tried display ads on platforms which would lead to conversion, saw what as a message was working and what was leading to a particular purchase. And from there, started expanding the marketing budget with the same message to a larger set of audience, and then to a much larger set of audience, right? So started small with limited budgets, iterated on the message, realized what was that thing that was landing for the consumer the best, and then took on and spent a little bit more money on expanding the reach of the message, and then so on and so forth, right? And of course, mass media came in much, much later towards the end. But I think our own channels of getting feedback from the consumer were very important, because I think with limited monies, what happens is that the scope for going wrong is dramatically lower, right? The risk you can take as a startup on a large spend is dramatically lower, which is why it's the most important that you get your message right before you actually go mass in terms of the communication.
Right. While you're looking for the right digital channels, it's also important to pick the right marketing and advertising partner, because, of course, they are the ones who will be driving conversations on the front end with consumers. So tell us a little bit about what you really look for in a great marketing partner.
Well, I think, the ability to experiment was really, really high, because, the traditional formats in which advertising was happening was somewhere which was led by really big FMCG giants, so which made it very important for us to constantly keep innovating. So I think partners who could innovate and were constantly looking at trying out newer stuff became one of the most important parameters for selection. The second thing that was really important was, as a group at the Moms Co, we were all very passionate about what we do. So finding a similar passion in a partner was really, really important. Like, you need to care for the consumer. At the end of the day, we are creating products for moms who are starved for time, and then we're looking out for some instant solutions. And if someone doesn't understand the sentiment of that woman, then it becomes really hard to kind of strike a right chord with the person, right? So I think understanding the brand and a constant need to experiment is very, very important. Having said that, it's really important, because what's going to happen is all your partners over a period of time are going to constantly keep changing, because with scale, newer and newer people will come, right? Which is where I think that is a very, very iterative process, because at each stage of your business, your asks from that particular partner is going to be very different, and that's going to keep changing. So I think, but at that point of time, at any given point of time, just finding the partner who sort of shares the same value for you and shares the same passion for you for the brand is very, very important.
Right. One question that is a very important question is on pricing, because, of course, pricing strategies can be a very powerful tool for growing a brand. So what are the kind of tips that you have to ensure that players or entrepreneurs out there opt for a relevant pricing strategy for a new brand?
So pricing, as you said, Priya, I completely agree there. That's very, very crucial in terms of anything to be launched. It becomes very important. My only advice to people is that, just choose a segment where you want to play in, right? And who's your consumer that you want to market the product to and sell the product to. And of course, keeping in mind the actual product cost for making of what you're making, right? But at the end of the day, it's very important to realize that, the consumer's needs are constantly evolving. And either the consumer is going to look out for a product that drives value for money, in which case it has to be a mass product at a very, very cost-effective pricing, or they will go aspirational and get a premium product, right? In which case you could drive the premium, but then the brand needs to stand for something more as a premium and an aspirational feel for it. So I think getting into it first, aligning on whether do you want to play in this mass segment for value of money consumer or go down to the space of premium consumer. And that as a choice is the most important choice. And after that, of course, benchmarking as an exercise is an obvious next step, where you figure out who's the next best competitor, what is your product offering that differentiates your product from anyone else, and is there a price that you can command in terms of a premium to that price, which is already existent in the market, right? And that kind of then works out. But I think the first thing to figure out is which segment do you want to play?
Right, of course. Along with that, one crucial element, and I face that when I'm shopping online, is payment experience. Because when there's a bad payment experience, there's a large chance that shoppers really drop off. So just wanted to understand from your perspective, what is the best practice that you can put in place for a great payment experience?
I think I'm one of those consumers who drops off if the payment process is not smooth. Like, I have my choice of brands where I always shop from, just because my credit card history sort of stayed there, and just the checkout experience is very, very important, and it's just so easy. So I think the most important thing, even as a consumer for me, is ease of shopping, right? So if you have details of mine which are already put in, and I can say quickly shop off, it's great. Even if it is not, I think having the option to quickly check out with minimum restrictions on the number of information that you need to feed in should be there. And what we've also seen at the Momsco is a very, very growing UPI need, and that's how more and more consumers are beginning to shift. So I think for us, as even as a seller or as a brand, right? For me, if you ask me for something, when I choose someone, it has to be ease for the consumer. It has to be very quick checkouts because it's extremely important. And the third is very important is the how quickly you can integrate and how smoothly you can integrate with the payments partner.
Right. While it's ease of shopping for the consumer or for business, it's, how well or how effectively the business optimizes the payment, effectively optimizes the payment data available. So tell us a little bit about how a brand can utilize this data to their benefit and expand business.
Yeah, the data that you get typically in terms of COD and prepaid, the way we look at it is we're looking at it as saying that how much trust that the consumer actually has on your platform to actually put in those details and get ahead the premium, as a prepaid customer. I remember this is very long back in time when we started 5 years back. And, there was this particular celebrity who was making a purchase from the website. And I got a call from the celebrity and they asked me saying, is it even safe for me to put in my credit card details? And that for us was a message that hit at that point of time to say that, there's so much doubt in the minds of the consumer for newer brands and newer platforms that are constantly evolving, that being able to get a large proportion of people from buying prepaid is one of the parameters that also kind of tell people how aware they're of your brand and how trustworthy is the positioning of the brand that they can sort of put in that, right? So I think one of the most important metrics that I monitor on a weekly basis is how many COD orders versus prepaid orders and what's been the change between the two in terms of growth of COD or growth of prepaid, because that for me is one of the most important parameters of also checking brand health. And sometimes also you realize that, something, the payment gateway is not working, which is why the consumer is just choosing COD and moving out. But I think just monitoring that as data is very, very important for us. It also tells you a lot about the consumer.
Absolutely. And, that's something that is very important for brands out there to keep in mind. So thanks for that, Malika. Another question I had, and you briefly alluded to it in the earlier questions, was on influencer marketing, on how you use the influencer channel. And my question is on just that thing, branded content, influencer marketing is a very important part of the overall strategy for any D2C player. So just wanted to understand from your perspective, how do you pick the right influencer and a partner to work with, and how do you ensure that this outreach plan is the right plan to get in touch with your target consumers?
Yeah, so I think I'll give you a little bit more elaborate answer on this because it's changed over the period of time. But I think the most important thing that you can do while let's start with first identification of the influencer. The primary step that we take towards identifying the influencer is the fact that, what does the influencer actually talk about? What are the values of the influencer, right? Which are the competitive brands that they kind of endorse? Even simple things, for instance, of, I play in a particular segment, but a parallel segment will also have a similar, either a massy appeal or a premium appeal or a luxury appeal to it, right? And, sort of picking up which are the influencers they are picking on, because that's the kind of audience that the influencer would have, right? Depending on what's the kind of content they're creating. So that becomes extremely important in the space of first identifying your influencer. Second, what you immediately do after that is try and check on what is the reach and what is the engagement of the consumer, because that's what's going to be the metrics that is going to drive your brand parameters going forward. And then how well is the, with the audience of the influencer engaging with the influencer? That also becomes extremely important. And once you've done that is where you can sort of lock in and plan on who's the influencer with which we are going to go ahead with a campaign or a regular reach out, right? But I think when it comes down to measurement, what we typically measure is that you could either use an influencer for reaching out to newer audience, in which case reach becomes an extremely important metrics to monitor. Or you could use an influencer for sort of running a bottom funnel campaign where you want a purchase to happen or announcement to happen for a sale or anything else, in which case you see how much traffic the influencer can drive to your platform. And there are the two ways in identifying, depending on what your marketing need is at that point of time, that what is the sort of influencer you want to get on board.
Right. That's of course something that businesses are keeping in mind, and with the number of macro, micro and larger influencers that are there in the market, it's becoming a very, very important tool for overall marketing. But Malika, I want to talk a little bit about inbound marketing techniques like lead generation and lead nurturing. So tell us a little bit about what was your strategy for lead generation and lead nurturing?
Yeah, so typically lead generation and lead nurturing is more a B2B concept. For us, what we do is we would run campaigns like a top funnel campaign and a mid funnel campaign, which is much more broader and larger in audience. So typically run it on YouTube, Facebook, other platforms for just getting newer reaches, right? So for us, most of the newer lead generation typically happens from running all of these top funnel campaigns instead of normal lead generation that a B2B site would do.
Right. And just final question before I let you go, Malika, on SEO, because of course, search engine optimization is perhaps the single most important technique for businesses these days, specifically when it comes to organic growth overall. So just want to understand from your perspective, what is the kind of SEO playbook that you used and what kind of playbook is sustainable in the long run?
Yeah. I am a big fan of SEO actually. I think it's a low cost investment that constantly compounds, right? Because once done right, you don't have to keep reiterating on that. And it's fairly the lowest cost in terms of whatever marketing spends that you're doing. So I think it's extremely important. People tend to ignore it to a very large extent. And my honest advice to everybody would be like, please don't do it. Please invest in it. It takes a little bit of time, but once done right over a period of time, you start seeing a compounding effect of what you've done. A couple of things that how we integrate SEO in terms of our entire chain is that I actually use search terms all the way from figuring out what a product name should be to even the content that goes up on any of the PDP pages across, right? So because what the consumer is searching for, like especially on an online network, there's a search that the consumer is doing, and trying to show up on that search is extremely important because that's very, very high intent for a consumer to make a purchase. So making sure that your content kind of encapsulates all of that searches becomes extremely important, which is where you kind of do the content optimization for it. On a product name perspective, I've realized a lot of times that the name of the product that I wanted to keep was nowhere close to anything that was understood by or was being searched by most of the people, which is where I also use it in my product naming as a mechanism. And of course, other ways of driving SEO in terms of creating blog content and everything else is also very prevalent. If you can show up, if someone like searches for the best baby products, and if you're the first site to show up, obviously there's a lot of traffic that just gets generated out there as well. So yeah, I think as I said before, right, a very low cost investment that generally compounds over time. So a must, you need to spend some time on the SEO.
All right. Thanks so much for that, Malika. I think you've given us a very good overall perspective on how the marketing techniques should be aligned with business requirements. So thanks so much. And I'm sure everyone tuning in today has really taken back a lot of insights from this conversation. So thanks so much for joining in. And, please stay tuned in for more such insightful conversations on Scale Up India, the Unicorn Spotlight, a series in collaboration with PayU.